I mean, nothing should surprise us anymore. You understand? Because what is happening under normal circumstances ought to be a big surprise. But after 8 years of enduring this government, what can surprise you? There's nothing that can surprise you anymore. Now, I listened to the finance minister in a celebratory mood and actually making the claim that after these achievements, the new patriotic party is now unassailable, and that its main opponent, the National Democratic Congress, has nothing to say. That virtually saying that they've won this election already because of what he claims to be the achievements of the government. What is the achievement? You are heavily indebted, so heavily indebted that you don't have the capacity to repay. Those who gave you the loans want something back. They have two options under these circumstances. Either to lose everything or to claw back whatever they can get. This is the options that our creditors have today. To lose everything or to find ways of clawing back some of what they have given us. So they enter into an agreement with you and say, look, you owe us so much. We know you cannot pay. You don't have the capacity to pay. Okay. So as a goodwill measure, some of what you owe is forgiven. Listen to me carefully. Some of what you owe is forgiven. You are going to have to pay the rest. And how you're going to pay it is that deny your people employment. So monies or resources which have gone into paying salaries and so on, don't spend it on salary. Don't give your people employment. Keep it aside so you can pay us. You understand? Increase taxation. Increase the level of taxes so you can accumulate some resources to pay us. Increase tariffs on electricity, on water, and so on, in order to accumulate some resources to pay us. Let your people suffer more by increasing the price of petroleum products in order to accumulate some resources to pay us. Not for you to develop, not for you to build roads, not for you to build gadgets and so on, but just to enable you to raise resources to pay us so we can get something back. My brother, this is what we are celebrating. This is what we are celebrating. And we should not forget that what people celebrate actually reveals who they are. And if our government is celebrating this, it tells us very clearly who and who we have put in government. You know, I'm so troubled. I'm so very deeply troubled. Because if you watch our history, we have gone to the IMF for bailouts 17 times. And every time we have gone to the IMF, things have gotten worse. Check the history. Okay? And yet, we keep going to the IMF all the time and hoping that something new would come out of these negotiations. Indeed, our leaders have forgotten the advice which was given by Einstein. Einstein's advice is that, look, if you keep doing the same thing all all the time, and you expect a different outcome, your head must be examined. This is the advice that Einstein gave a long time ago. And we keep doing the same thing all the time and expect a different outcome. Our leaders, according to Einstein, not me, need to have their heads examined. It's unbelievable what we are doing. Now you see, in 2001, the whole world went into flames. Why? Because at the time, developing countries, including Ghana, were spending 67% of their total export earnings on debt servicing. And there was a crisis, global crisis. It is that global crisis which went to the development of the concept of HIPIC. 67% of total export earnings, and the world was in crisis. Now look at Ghana's situation today. Today, we are spending 128% of total national revenue, not export revenue. Total national revenue, 128%. Debt servicing, debt repayment, and public sector emoluments. I mean, this situation is far worse than the situation we were in 2001. Okay? Now, in 2001, what happened? We were given debt relief, in fact, debt cancellation, not relief, debt cancellation. We were given concessionary loans and so on. I mean, so much. After we had climbed the mountains and declared from the mountaintop that we were highly indebted and poor, that we were in a state of hopelessness. We are in 2024. 23 years later, we are in a worse crisis than we were in 2001. Again, confirming that the IMF and the World Bank recourse to the neoliberal economic path does not resolve any crisis, but only deepens the crisis. Now, what surprises me? What surprises me? I've already said that that issue surprises us. And I'm saying that what surprises me, because even within that sphere of no surprises, there are some things that are shocking. You understand? Now, what shocks me is that our leaders perhaps are so daft that when they are told, when those responsible for underdevelopment tell them that, look, there's no salvation for you, they are so daft that they can't hear, they can't listen, they can't understand. Yes, I was in this country, we were all in this country in 2001. When the representatives of the World Bank and the IMF in Ghana wrote a letter, a formal letter to President Kufuor, telling him that their star people, Jerry Rawlings and the National Democratic Congress had destroyed the Ghanaian economy beyond redemption. You remember? They wrote the letter to President Kufuor. Now, 2009, after 8 years of President Kufuor's administration, the same people wrote the same letter to President Mills, telling him that the Kufuor administration had destroyed the economy beyond redemption. Now, these were the same institutions praising Jerry Rawlings to the high heavens, calling on other African countries to emulate the example of the Rawlings administration. These were the same institutions praising President Kufuor to the high heavens and calling on other African leaders to emulate his example. Now, I would have thought that our leaders would have learned some lessons. Some lessons from what representatives of these two institutions were saying. They learned nothing. Nothing happened to them. They are doing the same things that wrecked the national economy. And it's unbelievable. Now, in a few months' time, in 5 months, we'll be going for an election. And listen to me very carefully. All of these politicians are coming to us promising heaven, as they always do. You elect us, and we will do this, we will do that, and so on. They are really promising us heaven on earth. As soon as you vote for them, you cast your ballot, they quickly run to the IMF and the World Bank. The IMF and the World Bank now decide what it is that they can do and what is it that they cannot do. And indeed, invariably, the IMF and the World Bank tell them not to follow the promises that they made to the people, not to listen to the people who elected them. So what do we do? Elections, what does it really mean when we talk about elections in Ghana? Elections in Ghana is not about choices. It's not about choosing between parties and choosing between presidential candidates. Elections in Ghana have become a means of choosing new faces that will represent the IMF and the World Bank. Because whoever you elect, they will go back to the IMF and the World Bank. IMF and the World Bank will become the governors of our country. So why do we pretend ourselves that we have choices in elections? Why don't we simply elect the IMF and the World Bank and forget all these campaigns, noise making, and so on? Because invariably, whoever you elect ends up with the World Bank and the IMF. And the World Bank and the IMF will tell them what to do, in spite of the promises they made, in spite of your expectations, and so on. So that is the value of elections in Ghana and elsewhere in the new colonies. We are electing what faces should represent the World Bank and the IMF. Finish. Now, there's something else which is interesting. A few days, maybe weeks, before we announced that we're going to the IMF for the bailout, everybody and anybody who mattered in government told us that it was reckless to go to the IMF. You remember? I remember the finance minister making a clear statement that we will not go to the IMF today or tomorrow. Over our dead bodies, we won't go there. It will be a disaster to go there. At that time, the current finance minister was a minister of state at the finance ministry. I recall the late deputy minister of finance, what is his name? Saying that, how can we go to the IMF? We would never go, and so on. They have gone. They have not just gone, they are telling us that we should renew their mandate because they have done what they themselves told us is abominable. Can you believe it? They told us that it's abominable to go to the IMF. It doesn't resolve any problem. It's a disaster. They went, now they come back to us and say, we have done what we said is abominable. Please clap for us. Let us celebrate together. Maybe Einstein was right. Maybe, just maybe, Einstein was right. Our leaders need to have their heads properly examined if this is their behavior. Now, my brother, why are we where we are today? And it's unfortunate there's a quotation which would have fitted properly into this discussion. It's a quotation which is captured in a book authored by Dr. Don Atta, which will be launched on Monday. And I have the book.
The book will be launched on Monday.
On Monday. Yes, I have the book. I have a copy of the book. Yes. No, because I'm doing the launching. No, I'm doing the launching of the book. I'm doing the launching of the book.
Okay.
So I had the privilege of getting the first copy so I can read it and you know, do the launching. And there's a portion that I would have liked to quote, but I don't have the book with me now. Now, listen, my brother. You know, Lord Lugard, in our history, Lord Lugard was a colonial governor. And indeed, he's wrongly credited for being the initiator of the indirect rule, which became British policy and so on. As a matter of fact, it was his wife, who was a journalist, who put together those ideas about indirect rule and so on. And Lord Lugard actually wrote, that a time will come when the Africans will kick us out, and that their duty as the colonialists was to make sure that when they leave, they would hand over to the elite and chiefs of Africa. The elite and chiefs of Africa, who will be made to believe that they, the British, are the best white people and that we are safe doing business with them, so that they can continue to maintain their stranglehold on the former colonies. This is Lord Lugard. Lord Lugard saw that we will gain independence. He had no doubt that at some point there would be resistance against colonial rule. But he knew that British interests could be safeguarded if they handed over to the elite and chiefs of Africa, who would believe that they had good partners in the colonialists, and therefore would maintain the colonial order in a new guise. What is happening today? This is a manifestation of Lord Lugard's thoughts. Clear manifestation of Lord Lugard's thoughts. You understand? And it's a clear evidence that indeed the British have succeeded. They didn't succeed initially, because they were compelled by the masses of Ghana and Africa to hand over to leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, to Patrice Lumumba, to Sekou Touré, and so on, which were not the elite of Africa, steeped in the belief that the colonial ways were the best. So what did they do? They came back and they killed them one by one. They assassinated Lumumba, removed his front teeth as souvenir, and dissolved his body in acid. They overthrew Kwame Nkrumah in a bloody coup d'etat in February 1966, and a few years later, he died under suspicious circumstances of cancer and so on. Trace the history. They executed America Cabral and so on. In order for the opponents of Nkrumah to assume power and to mess us up big time, as they're doing today. So what is happening today is a clear manifestation of the dreams of the colonial power, of the dreams of Lord Lugard and so on. That's where we are today. Now, it is important to understand that the national liberation movement throughout Africa had clear objectives, and I've said this so many times, you understand, clear objectives. The first objective was that we as African people, as colonized people, ought to be able, one, to choose our own path of development, to elect our own leaders, to own our resources, exploit these resources for our own benefit, and tear down the colonial boundaries which have nothing to do with us, and build the United States of Africa under the banner of socialism. That was the dream of the independence movement. The goal of the independence movement, these were the goals of the independent movement. What is happening today is the direct opposite of what Sergeant Ajete lost his life for, what Corporal Tipo lost his life for, what Kwame Nkrumah went to prison for, what Lumumba was killed for, what Cabral was killed for, and why the 1966 coup took place. You understand? Clear. What are we doing? We are building these states as the periphery of the world capitalist system, or the periphery of the world capitalist system. So, what we describe as our path to economic development only helps to fill the pockets of the giant corporations in the colonial metropolis. And the analysis that Dr. Toniedu did today was perfect. Who are those going to benefit from this arrangement that we are supposed to be applauding? One, those who gave us the loans, which have become unpayable now. We are creating the conditions to make the loans that they gave us payable now. Okay? So they will be beneficiaries. Those who brokered the deals, the go-betweens, as for them, they have collected their percentages already, they are gone. Whether you can pay or not pay, the transaction advisors and so on, they've made their money, cool, they are gone. Who are the losers? The losers are the Ghanaian people who today, in a period of 7 years, have to pay 5 cedis instead of 50 pesos for kenke. They are the losers. You understand? Now, there's something which just simply beats my imagination. For those of us who didn't go to the kinds of schools that you people went to, okay?
Today it's my family people, and they're my school people.
That is true, you're right. It's my family and my school. So you see why you are deeply involved in what
It's my family and my school.
You're right.
Those of us who didn't go to those schools, like Oxford, like Harvard, like Yale, and so on, we can only remember what we were taught sometimes in secondary school. And in secondary school, commerce class, commerce, not even economics, commerce, secondary school, we were told that inflation is the rate at which prices rise or fall. All right? Secondary school definition of inflation. So let's apply the secondary school definition of inflation. Forget your Yale and your Oxford and so on. They may be far more sophisticated. We are in a situation where petroleum prices have risen by over 100%. We are in a situation where kenke prices have risen by about 1,000%. You understand? We are in a situation where we are buying, how do you call it? My English sometimes is not sufficient. No. Tomatoes like this. Is it a ball of tomatoes or what? One single lege tomatoes is 10 cedis. couple of months ago, I went to the market and bought one lege okro for 10 cedis. And we are being told that inflation is dropping. Did my secondary school commerce lecture deceive me? Was the definition provided by my secondary school education of inflation being the rate at which prices rise or fall a deceit? How? Prices are rising astronomically. They are not just rising, they are rising astronomically. And our leaders said that, look, we should clap for them because the rate of inflation is falling. How is the rate of inflation falling when prices are rising astronomically? I can't understand. Somebody must explain to me what inflation then is or is not. You understand? And then they come up with useless statistical averages. And I mean absolutely useless statistical averages. They tell you about the gross domestic product. And they tell you about per capita income, debt to GDP, and so on. Useless statistical averages. You see, when they tell you that per capita income has risen in a certain year, you can find out sometimes that the reality is that the vast majority of people in a certain society, their incomes have gone down. A minute 1% have had their incomes quadrupling or tripling. Because the statistical average, what they do is that those whose incomes have quadrupled and tripled, they add their incomes to those whose incomes have dwindled by 50%, by 60%, and so on, put it all together and divide it by the whole. And that gives them that statistical average that they throw at us. Useless. Doesn't tell us anything. Doesn't tell us whose income is rising and whose income is falling. You understand what I'm saying? And then sometimes I just wonder. They come to us throwing things at us, especially their useless degrees and so on, throwing them at us. And I ask, how do these people come to acquire these laurels, if they are laurels, these degrees, if they are worth anything? How do they come to acquire it? Sana, who knows the effect of petroleum price increases better than the trotro driver and the taxi driver? How many PhDs does the trotro driver have? How many PhDs does the taxi driver have? And yet, they really understand the full impact of petroleum price increases. When these overvalued, useless academics and so on are preparing their thesis for their award of doctorates, what do? They go to the villages, talk to the cocoa farmers, those engaged in the production of cocoa, put their stories together in a format which academia accepts, present it, and they get PhDs. They and the farmer who understands the cocoa industry better. They and the farmers who understand the cocoa industry better. So the time has come for us to wake up, to face reality, than to be chasing these useless phantoms who tell us nothing. Now, why are we here? Why are we here? Let's take gold production. And who am I in the gold industry? Who am I? But I listen to the biggest, the most influential and so on. And one of the people I like to listen when it comes to the gold industry is Sir Sam Jonah. Not long ago, Dr. Sir Sam Jonah gave a lecture in which he told us in the face that Ghanaian interest in gold mining is less than 1%. Now, if you are Africa's leading producer of gold, and your total indigenous interest in the industry is less than 1%, where are you going? Where are you going? How did we get here? We sold our interest in gold mining in order to generate resources for consumption for a very short period, and that is why we are here. Under former President Kufuor, we used to have a golden share in Anglo Gold Ashanti. That golden share enabled us to make the final decisions on all major transactions. The golden share. If you had the golden share, the shareholders could not decide anything without reference to you. We sold the golden share. We sold the golden share for peanuts so that we could balance the budget. And then we deceived ourselves that the shares were being floated on some what do they call them?
Stock exchange.
Stock exchanges and so on, and the Ghanaians would buy. Check from the Ghanaians who bought stocks on the stock exchange. All of them have lost their money. So, Ghana is the leading producer of gold in Africa, and yet we benefit almost nothing from gold exploitation. That is why we are here. Look, for a long time, Ghana used to be the leading producer of cocoa in the world. We came to second position. So we have been moving from first to second to third, back to second, and so on. We've never gone beyond third, the third largest producers of cocoa in the world. What is happening to the cocoa industry today? Every year, we go abroad and borrow dollars in huge amounts, and we use the dollars, we say we use the dollars to purchase cocoa. Which cocoa farmer is paid in dollars? Which cocoa farmer in this country is paid in dollars? We pay them in cedis. You understand? Now, because we borrow these huge amounts in dollars to pay cocoa farmers so that we can get their cocoa and so on, the cocoa we produce simply goes to repay these huge loans that we take for cocoa purchases. Doesn't it make a lot more sense to find cedis to pay the cocoa farmers who depend on cedis, who will pay in cedis rather than borrow in dollars? But today, that is not possible, because the means of raising cedis for cocoa purchases has been destroyed. All those who invested in government bonds and so on are having to take haircuts. Today, it is no longer secure to put your money in government bonds. Before, you could raise bonds in order to find the cedis to pay the cocoa farmer.
There's even a specific item about the cocoa bill.
Yeah. Today, that whole thing has been destroyed after 7.5 years of the MPP administration. Now, this is the problem. We were told that this economy could be developed, would actually be developed without recourse to loans. I'm not the one saying it. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, he told us there's no need to borrow. He told us that he has worked at the Bank of Ghana before. He knows how much money is stuck in the Bank of Ghana, and that there's no need to borrow in order to develop. Today, his government has borrowed more than any other government in Ghanaian history. They borrow so much that when they are counting countries that are heavily indebted in Africa, we are amongst the first three. Senna, am I lying? He told us that there's no need to borrow. No, why are you borrowing? That borrowing is a mark of incompetence. Today, they have borrowed more than any and everybody in Ghana's history. They borrow so much that when you are looking for superstars in borrowing in Africa, they count among the superstars. And they say we should celebrate them. Celebrate them for what? For borrowing, which is bad? Unbelievable. And the worst thing is the kind of excuses they give for where we are today. And their number one excuse is the COVID pandemic. Listen to all of them. They can't say, oh, we were doing so well until COVID struck. True? Master, my witness is not very far. My witness is in Ghana here. My witness is a parliamentary candidate of the New Patriotic Party in the last elections in the Sanerigu constituency. That's my witness. This lady told us that she was giving part of the HIPIC funds.
COVID funds.
COVID funds, thank you, my brother. She told us that she was giving part of the COVID funds for her campaign. And that her constituency chairman and polling station something were all giving some. What does that mean? They had so much money for COVID that they could actually spend some on electioneering campaigns. How then is COVID such a bad thing? Then COVID was very good for them. They had excess money, too much money, that they could actually spend some on electioneering campaigns. So how was COVID so bad? How is COVID then responsible for the quagmire that we find ourselves in? Somebody must explain. You see, my brother, we are in a very, very bad place. And I've read predictions which have been made by knowledgeable people with economic background and so on. There's this guy called Thompson, who has been speaking on the economy on a regular basis and so on, and others, who are saying that the next 10 years is going to be hellish for the people of Ghana. And it's on that basis that I say that the NPP will be so very lucky if they lose the elections. In fact, they believe in reciting Bible verses and singing hymns and so on. If they lose the elections, they should intensify the singing of hymns and reading of Bible verses. Because it will be such a huge blessing for them. Because the Armageddon that is coming is a huge Armageddon. And if they win the elections, they will be faced with the Armageddon. Because all of these measures will not resolve any of the crises that our people face. It can only deepen the crisis. The people I worry for, the people I'm concerned about, are those people who are likely to win the elections if the NPP should lose. They should prepare themselves. Because they are not walking into paradise. They are walking into the teeth of the storm. There's nothing. The country is broke. The country is bankrupt. And that is what they are likely to inherit. And they should not take this out of their heads. If they do, it's to their own detriment. And they should stop making lavish promises. They should stop making lavish promises. It is time to tell the people of Ghana the truth about where we are and the difficulties that lie ahead. Anything to the contrary will push them into the eye of the storm. Anything other than that will result in perhaps what is worse than the Kenyan situation. And you know why I say what is worse than the Kenyan situation? Because Kenya did not experience June 4, 1979, has not experienced that yet. Kenya has not experienced December 31st, 1981. You understand? We have experienced June 4, 1979. We have experienced 31st December 1981. If something should happen again, with that background and experience, you can imagine what it will be like. We can imagine what it will be like. So me, I know. I'm sitting here, I know clearly, without doubt, that this neoliberal order will lead us only to more disaster. I'm clear in my mind that the problem which confronts us is the problem of capitalism. And I know that until the conditions are ripe for moving away from neoliberalism, for smashing the capitalist system, there's no remedy. So I am not going to rush for power when these conditions exist. My duty and the duty of all revolutionary progressive forces is to work for the maturation of the subjective and objective factors for revolution and to carry out revolution in this country. So, I'm not rushing for power. But those who do not recognize this and believe that within the neoliberal framework, under the ambit of capitalism, they can effect changes, that is their headache. Let them go ahead. Let them struggle for power. But at least let them be honest with us. Because if they are not honest with us, if they are going to tell us that they can bring inflation down in 1 year, if they are going to tell us that they can arrest the dollar or the cedi and give the keys to the IGP and so on, they should go ahead and make those statements. We will hold them to their words. If they come and they don't arrest the cedi and give the key to the IGP, they are in trouble. You understand? If they tell us today that you can develop without borrowing and they come and they borrow and we get into this bankrupt situation again, they are in trouble. So let them watch out. But finally, Senna, there is nothing to celebrate. There's everything to mourn over the current situation and nothing to celebrate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we started on that note, and Comrade Kwesi Pratt has concluded on the same note, because, of course, Dr. Tony Edu was the very first person to speak to this topic, and he was also of the opinion that the capitalist path is not the path for us. I always say when we want to, the capitalist path is when somebody tells you that government has no business doing any business. That government's job is to create an enabling environment for the private sector. Then they will do trickle down economics. So,
you have brought up a very important issue. And check our history. Kojo, check our history. All those who come to us telling us that the private sector is the engine of growth and that government has no business doing business and so on. What happens to them when we give them power? They all with alacrity run into the state sector and grab it. They don't stay in the private sector. Check the records. They tell you that the private sector is the engine of the group, but they don't like the private sector. They don't stay there. They run to the state sector and hijack it. Open your eyes.